The perfect criminal is the one you never see coming. They are the ghost in the machine, the face in the crowd that your eyes slide right over. In the high-stakes world of international drug trafficking, image is everything. You expect the tattooed enforcer, the young runner in the tracksuit, or the nervous mule sweating through his shirt at customs. You do not expect a grandmother. You do not expect a 72-year-old woman lugging her suitcases off a luxury cruise ship, complaining about her joints, looking forward to a cup of tea. It is the ultimate camouflage, the grey euro. A cloak of invisibility woven from age, frailty, and the assumption that crime is a young man's game. But in the UK underworld, greed does not have a retirement age. This is the story of Roger and Susan Clarke, a couple who decided that their golden years would not be spent gardening or babysitting, but smuggling millions of pounds of class A cocaine into the United Kingdom. They thought they had the perfect cover. They thought they were untouchable. But they made one fatal, arrogant mistake. They assumed the police were as senile as they pretended to be. This is how the granny drug mule and her husband tried to flood the UK streets with snow, and how their luxury retirement ended in a concrete cell. Let us go back to the beginning. To understand why a couple in their 70s would risk dying in prison, you have to understand who Roger and Susan Clarke really were. To their neighbours in the quiet suburbs, they were unremarkable. Just another pair of pensioners enjoying the slow lane. They drove ordinary cars, they lived in a modest house. They were the people you held the door for at the supermarket. But that domestic facade was a lie. This was not a case of a sweet old couple falling on hard times and being coerced by a scary gang. Roger and Susan were career criminals. They were veterans. Decades prior, they had been moving cannabis resin. They had a taste for the high life that a state pension simply could not provide. They were addicted to the adrenaline of the smuggle. Just as much as the money, they viewed themselves as sophisticated logistics experts. They believed they were smarter than the system. In their minds, they were the Fred and Ginger of the narco world. Smooth, classy, untouchable. By 2018, they had established a rhythm. They were not smuggling drugs in swallowed balloons or hidden inside car tires. They were doing it in style. They booked tickets on the MC Marco Polo, a luxury cruise liner. This was their method. Who checks the elderly couple coming off a 2-week Caribbean holiday, who suspects the grandmother carrying a heavy suitcase filled with souvenirs for the grandkids. It was genius in its simplicity. The cruise ship environment is relaxed. Security is often focused on weapons or alcohol, not the sweet old lady in cabin 408. For years, it worked. They took trips to the Caribbean, St. Lucia, the Bahamas, destinations that just so happened to be major transit points for the South American cocaine trade. They would enjoy the sun, the buffet, the entertainment. And then, at a designated port, a bag swap would happen, or a delivery would be made to their cabin. They were not handling street deals. They were the pipeline. They were the funnel pouring high-purity cocaine directly into the veins of the British County Lines networks. December 2018. The setup was familiar. Roger and Susan booked a cruise to the Caribbean. The itinerary was a dream. Antigua, St. Lucia, Barbados. Sun, sea, and smuggling. They boarded the Marco Polo with empty suitcases. Well, not empty. Prepared. The plan was audacious. They were not hiding a few ounces. They were going for a massive haul. While docked in St. Lucia, the exchange was made. We do not know the exact face of the contact. A local fixer, a cartel representative. But the handover was substantial. Susan Clarke, a woman who should have been knitting, was packing bricks of high-grade cocaine into the linings of her luggage. 9 kilograms. Let that number sink in. 9 kilos of cocaine. In street value, once cut and distributed by the gangs they served, this was worth nearly £2 million. This is a heavy load. Literally. Imagine the physical exertion for a 72-year-old woman. Imagine the nerve it takes to zip that bag shut, knowing that inside lies a life sentence. Knowing that if a sniffer dog walks past, it is over. But they did not panic, they did not sweat. They went back to the buffet. They mingled with the other passengers. They played the role they had perfected. The weary, happy travelers. They spent the return journey sitting on top of a gold mine, sailing across the Atlantic, believing they had pulled it off yet again. But this brings us to the mistake, the fatal flaw in their master plan. The Clarkes were suffering from a terminal case of hubris. They believed that because they had gotten away with it before, they would get away with it again. They believed their age made them invisible, but they forgot one thing. The National Crime Agency has a long memory. See, Roger and Susan were not fresh faces. They had a record. Years prior, they had been busted in Norway for smuggling cannabis. They had served time. They were on the radar. The mistake was not just the crime, it was the pattern. The NCA, working with the border force, had noticed a strange anomaly. The Clarks were spending a fortune on luxury cruises, far more than their declared income could support. They were living like lottery winners on a pensioner's budget, and they were taking the same routes. Over and over again, the Caribbean route, the Pacific Islands known for cocaine transit. The dumb mistake here was not a slip-up in the packing. It was not a loose lip in a bar. It was the arrogance of predictability. They treated international drug trafficking like a weekly grocery run. They got comfortable, and in the world of organized crime, comfort is a death sentence. When the Marco Polo docked in Lisbon, Portugal, before heading back to the UK, the Portuguese police, tipped off by their British counterparts, were waiting. But they did not strike immediately, they watched. They wanted to see the couple's behavior. Were they nervous? Were they meeting anyone? The ship eventually docked. The passengers began to disembark. Roger and Susan Clarke walked down the gangway. Roger, 72, struggling with the bags. Susan, 70, walking beside him. They reached the customs hall. They looked tired. They looked harmless. Border Force officers stepped forward. "Excuse me, Mr. and Mrs. Clarke." A word. At this moment, most people would crumble. But the Clarks, they held the line. They played the confused elderly couple card instantly. The officers opened the suitcases. At first glance, it was just clothes. Cheap souvenirs. Dirty laundry. But the bags were heavy, too heavy. The officers pressed on the lining of the suitcases. It was hard, lumpy. They took a knife to the fabric. White powder. 4 suitcases. All of them modified. The lining was packed with block after block of high-purity cocaine. The game was up. But the Clarks did not confess. This is where it gets truly pathetic. Under interrogation, Susan Clarke looked the officers in the eye and claimed she had no idea what was in the bags. Her defense, she thought it was exotic fruit. She tried to tell seasoned narcotics agents that she had packed 9 kilograms of cocaine, believing it was pineapples and dried mangoes. Roger tried a different angle. He claimed he was writing a book about smuggling, and this was just research. He claimed he had been coerced. He threw every excuse at the wall, hoping something would stick. But the evidence was overwhelming. The texts, the financial records, the sheer brazen nature of the concealment. The trial was a humiliation. The grandmother defense fell apart instantly when the jury saw the sophistication of the concealment. These were not victims. They were wolves in sheep's clothing. The judge saw right through them. He noted that despite their age, they were unrepentant, calculated and motivated purely by greed. Roger Clarke was sentenced to 10 years and 6 months. Susan Clarke, the matriarch of the operation, was sentenced to 9 years. Given their ages, these were effectively life sentences. They were stripped of their assets. The house, the cars, the lifestyle, gone. There is a tragic irony to the story of Roger and Susan Clarke. They spent their lives trying to secure a luxury retirement. They risked everything for a few more years of comfort, a few more cruises, a few more expensive dinners. Instead, they found themselves in the one place where no amount of money matters. They serve as a brutal reminder to the criminal underworld. There is no profile that is safe. There is no age that grants you immunity. You can wear the cardigan. You can walk with a cane. You can play the sweet old lady. But if you carry the kilos, you do the time. The Clarks thought they were the smartest people in the room. They thought the police were looking for young thugs in hoodies. They were wrong. The police were looking for criminals. And in the end, that is all Roger and Susan were. Just 2 more numbers in the prison system. Their legacy reduced to a mugshot and a viral headline about a granny and her suitcase full of snow. Crime does not pay. And sometimes it does not even let you retire.